When Disney announced they would be making a new Star Wars trilogy that wouldn't focus on the Skywalkers, the entire internet seemed to conclude it would be the Old Republic. Well, recent comments by the man creating that trilogy, Rian Johnson, the director of The Last Jedi, make it pretty clear that the trilogy will not focus on the Old Republic. And then, it was as if 1,000 nerdy voices cried out in pain and were silenced. But it's really not that bad, guys. Let's talk about it. What is up, YouTube? It's Josh. This is the Den of Nerds. If you love Star Wars the way I do, subscribe to this channel. We do all sorts of coverage of all sorts of Star Wars things. Oh, and shout out to Oathkeeper1, who got the nerd card question correct in my latest Fantastic Four video. You definitely know your stuff when it comes to comic books. So shout out to you, Oathkeeper. There will be another nerd card question at the end of this video. Okay guys, let's talk about the new Star Wars trilogy. And if you don't know, there is a new trilogy of Star Wars films that are being created for after Episode 9. That's right, after this current saga, there's a brand new trilogy coming which will not continue the story of the current trilogy. You could call it the Rey trilogy, the Rey and Kylo trilogy, the Reylo trilogy if you want to make everyone mad. But in either case, that trilogy is not being continued immediately. And this was really confirmed when recently Daisy Ridley said she would be done with the Rey character after Episode 9, meaning they're definitely not going to continue her story right into the next trilogy. They also mentioned in the press release for the new trilogy that they're going to be exploring a place in Star Wars that has never been seen in the lore until now. So the natural question is, where do we think these films are going to take place and what are they going to be about? Now, a lot of people postulated that they would be in the Old Republic. Of course, the Old Republic is a fan favorite time period, but I almost immediately thought that it would not be where the new trilogy went. After all, we've explored this time and place in Star Wars lore before, even if those stories are no longer considered canon. That's exactly why everybody wants them. That time period is so popular, especially because of the Knights of the Old Republic games and the comic books made around that game time period. Well, recently Rian Johnson was asked directly about whether or not the new trilogy would focus on the Old Republic, and this is what he had to say. Oh, they love Knights of the Old Republic. I played that game when it first came out, and it was like, God, I loved it. Yeah, that's a fantastic game, and I understand it. The instinct to automatically go to something that you know and love, that you've already seen. To me, he says, what's really fun is the notion of what new stuff are we gonna see? What new stories can we tell? So yeah, the trilogy will not be about the Old Republic and will instead go in a completely new direction. Now, my current theory on that is that some of the writing he did for The Last Jedi probably took Rian to some pretty interesting places in canon. Maybe after a few discussions with the story group, he settled on a time and place that he was actually really looking forward to exploring. My belief is that this will have something to do with the Whills, possibly Snoke, or a new secret about the Force that we'll have to wait for The Last Jedi to know about. Once we see that movie, I think we'll have a better idea of what the new trilogy could be about. Oh, and don't freak out about the lack of Old Republic for this new trilogy. I personally believe we're going to be getting a lot of Old Republic in the coming years, but I believe it will be in television show format. Remember that live action show Disney slipped into their announcement with the new trilogy? Well, I personally believe that that will be an attempt to do an Old Republic meets Game of Thrones type show. The ties between Game of Thrones and Disney are ample. The two productions are incredibly close-knit, with a lot of their actors carrying over. Game of Thrones is also the most popular television show of all time, and it's funny that this new Star Wars live action show will launch the year after Game of Thrones has ended. I think a lot of studios will probably try to do a fantasy type political show to replace Game of Thrones in the consciousness of your average television watching fans. The Old Republic actually has a lot of stuff that is similar to Game of Thrones. For instance, there's a lot of armor and old kind of regal architecture. Swords would be everywhere, except in the Star Wars version of that, they would be lightsabers. The atmosphere would be very political, as the Sith and the Jedi might be coexisting with separate empires, having some kind of a war, maybe even a treaty. There's also the fact that this kind of a new place for Star Wars fans would need a lot of time to build up different characters and to make people understand what is going on in that world. Having a show where you spend 13 hours would actually be way more content than a trilogy of films. That's where my money is on, where we'll get the Old Republic, and it's possible we might also get it in whatever animated show Dave Filoni is off working on in secret right now. So there's no reason to be bummed about the lack of the Old Republic in this trilogy. I think we are still going to get it, and maybe in an even better way. But what do you guys think? Are you pissed that the Old Republic will not be the new trilogy? Do you think that it will circle around the Whills, or perhaps something around the nature of the Force? And do you think that the Old Republic will be something explored in the live action series? Let me know your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. All right, let's check that nerd card really quickly. I want to know, what is the name of the main character of the Knights of the Old Republic films, the famous Jedi who flips back and forth between the dark side with a purple and a red lightsaber? What is the name of that fan favorite character? Answer that question in the comment section below. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and nerdy day. See ya!